Well, I told you I'd have them, and I do. I have two experts in the field, of many fields, but today is long-term care insurance, and I welcome Erin Ardleigh of Dynama Insurance and our frequent contributor, Judy Heft. And when we talk about, we were chatting on the break about insurance and the whole thing of, when you mention insurance, it's always like, hey, I got to get a new car. Well, what's this insurance stuff? And it's never really a fun thing as such, but it is oh so necessary. Today, long-term care. Tell us what it is and why it is so important, maybe to people in my generation, at the ages we're at. Shh.
People in their 30s and 40s.
Youngsters.
Well, long-term care is a product that nobody likes to talk about because people often think that they will never need it. They think that's something that you use when you're old. And I'm never going to be old, and if I am old, I'm never going to need that. I'm never going to be sick.
Yeah.
And so long-term care is a product that people have a lot of misconceptions about. It's not just for when you're old, it's for whatever it is that you need assistance with your acts of daily living. And that could be because you're old and in a nursing home or an assisted living home, but it could also be because you've had an illness or a surgery and you need some assistance around the house. So really what it is it's a type of insurance that people should consider because it gives you more flexibility, more independence if you do find yourself recovering or in need of some extra help.
No, I think, Tony, a lot of people are under the assumption that once they get into Medicare, then they have long-term care insurance. But that really is not true at all because Medicare doesn't cover any of this. And the only way to get long-term care insurance through Medicare is to spend on all your assets and go on Medicaid. Nobody wants to do that.
Which becomes self-defeating. And you know, it's interesting because I can remember now myself, closer to the decade 6 than to the decade 3, but when I was like in my early 30s and finally beginning to make some money in small letters, my mother was widowed and she was at home, and I would think every once in a while, well, if something happens to her, I mean, I'm off the track. I'm a caregiver, you know, and that's the thing that a lot of people going to work today in their 30s really don't think of.
And it's very stressful. It puts such a strain on the relationship, especially if it's a young married couple.
Sure.
And they have young children. They end up being there having to take care of this, you know, older parent that has problems, and they don't have the money to pay for their care, and it's very, very costly.
I have a situation recently, I have one in here now, where it's an older girl, I guess she's in her 50s, and she's a niece taking care of her aunt. She's working at home from her job, but she's kind of like, okay, you know, Susie, not her real name, when's this going to stop? You know, maybe next week, let's see what happens, and not a fun place to be at all. And it hits you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
It just, you know, this is something that you can't predict it when it happens.
No, it's true.
But one of the things that at least we're going over on the outline, it's most people want to remain home. Now, there's, in my business, tax trusts in the States. There are, quote unquote, the assisted living facilities and the elder facilities. They're okay for some people. Other people are like, I don't want to live in what they term to be a warehouse environment. Right. You know, they never were the kind of people that liked a lot of people around. They weren't necessarily those, you know, they were the ones on the end of the block, and they want to remain in their home. And long-term care, really, insurance, from what I can say, is this is a way you can do this.
Yes, absolutely. Over half of the claims for long-term care policies are actually for home care. And so clients that are buying it should make sure their policy is designed to cover home care in the same way it would cover assisted living or nursing homes. But of course, most people want to remain at home as long as possible, and long-term care insurance can help cover the expenses of having someone come and assist so that you don't have to use your family and to cause them that stress and aggravation, but you can still be comfortable and stay at home.
Now, I say it on this show, and I say it wherever I might go. Give those people out there in television land an idea of what an assisted living facility may cost per month, and what types of financial arrangements those might do in order just to get in the door, you know?
Sure. Well, actually,
Excuse me.
there's some great resources out there where people can look and see what the costs of care are in their areas. One site is longtermcare.gov, where you can actually put in your metropolitan area and see what the costs are today, what they're projected to be in 15, 20 years. So in this part of Connecticut, the estimate right now for home care, just home care, is $50,000 a year. And for a nursing home, a semi-private room is over $100,000, and a private
Did you
room,
hear that, folks?
a private room is about $150,000 a year.
It's, and I mean, it's staggering, and you say how much, but yet the cost of care, the cost of having somebody there and rotating through 3 shifts and everything else, it's absolutely. So long-term care insurance helps you stay at home and helps to keep the cost down.
I was going to say, I have one client that was in an assisted living nursing home type of situation where he really needed a lot of care. He was starting to have, he had dementia, and he was spending over $300,000 a year just at the facility. Plus, he had his caregiver that he had from when he was home go with him. This is a man who had no family, so it's really important. It's so costly. I have clients that have caregivers in their home that are paying, for a couple, they're paying over $200,000 a year.
It's,
to
yeah.
get the double care.
And I mean, we have people watching us from wherever, but most of what our viewership is, if you want to call it greater New York metropolitan area. And this is the area we live in.
Right, and it's one of the most expensive in the country
Sure.
for care. We're fortunate because we have a lot of care providers and good facilities, but we are at the top of the price range in the country too. And one of the tools that Judy and I recommend to clients is to do this research for yourself or for your parents and to look at what are the costs and where might you be living in retirement, and to actually do some of those projections so that you can see the real numbers. So there's the emotional stress of needing your family to care for you, but there's also the hard numbers and the financial planning that you should undertake to see how much will this really cost me, what's likely.
One of the articles I was reading, one of the business magazines, I have tons of magazines come in here, because typically what I'll do is, I'll say, hey, does anybody want this? And somebody does, and so they'll kind of pile up after a while, then I get to read them. They were talking about parents, maybe people my age, a little bit older, who have amassed retirement or amassed savings, and the children, first home, tuition, hey mom, hey dad, or whatever the case may be, and they start, okay, well, I'll give it to you this time, and then this time becomes next time, and the time after that, and that's a whole nother subject to have you guys back on of, parents, hang on to your money, and make sure you're not out in the street after all this. But you would think that having long-term care insurance is something where you don't have to feel that, that little cash hoard that you've got, you can be a little bit kind of rest easier with that because you've got more resources on the way.
Right. I have clients that technically could pay for the cost of long-term care because they've saved and they have sufficient assets, but they still choose to buy long-term care policies because they like knowing that this is a pool of money that's earmarked just for me, and I can spend it on the best care, and I don't have to worry about, am I spending down my spouse's retirement? Am I spending down the kids' college tuition or the grandchildren's inheritance? And so for that reason, people do buy it, because it doesn't have to be a huge amount. It can just be a small cushion, but they like knowing this is set aside just for my care. I don't have to feel bad about using it. It's protected from the market. It's protected from creditors. It's mine. And that's comforting for most people. And that's what I see a lot of well-to-do clients planning for, is having that small cushion that provides them peace of mind.
Well, and it's interesting, we were chatting before we went on. To me, I might be more familiar with long-term care than somebody who's never bumped into it. But it seems to be a very, how could I put it, a very technical product. A product where you've got to understand a lot of different things, you have to ask a lot of different questions, most people coming through the door aren't going to do that, sadly, because people just aren't wired that way. Everything, like somebody told me the other day, and it's so true, everybody seems to understand the price of everything but the value of nothing. And with that said, the person selling this policy to the person buying the policy, you need a certain, as far as I'm concerned, a certain type of expertise, a certain type of sensitivity, a certain type, as they say in my business, of an awareness of a fiduciary responsibility that this is the right thing for you, as opposed to, hey, I want to make this commission. What types of things or what types of points that you can tell our folks out there that they should look at when they look to someone selling a particular product and also being there to represent that product should the need arise?
I think the most important thing, whether it's by interviewing multiple people within the industry or working with a broker that represents multiple companies, either avenue, but the most important thing is to look at several different companies, because a recent study that came out earlier this year highlighted that there's a 120% price difference between the least and the most expensive products that offer fundamentally the same thing. So if you're going to pay 120% more, you should really understand why.
And you mentioned, and something I don't want to not call attention to, someone representing a number of different companies. Why is that?
Well, for example, as a broker, I represent major insurance companies, and I can actually help the clients look at the different choices and do an apples to apples comparison. But there are other models where a person might be employed directly by one insurance company, and therefore that person is going to have a greater incentive to highlight that company's products and services, and they may not mention that there is a less expensive competitor. So it's important to do your homework as the consumer and to either really do the work to go to multiple companies yourselves, or ideally to work with a broker that can do that for you and can show you at least 3 products in your state so that you can see the price differences, because they are significant. And there are also features that one company may offer that another may not. And you should understand if you're
The
opting
differences
in or
with
out
that.
of those.
That alone might have saved you $100,000, folks. But we're coming up on a break, and man, we're just getting started. Tony DeAngelo, Erin Ardleigh, and Judy Heft talking about long-term care insurance. Back for part 2 right after this.